Hi, welcome to Archaeonomy. In this video I'll be discussing the magnificent ship burial discovered at Sutton Hoo in England. It's one of the most famous archaeological discoveries in Britain, and the grave goods have pride of place in the British Museum's collection. Sutton Hoo is located in Suffolk on the southeast coast of England. Near Woodbridge on the River Devon, there's a burial ground recognisable by its many circular barrows or tumuli. In 1938, the owner of the estate was Mrs. Edith Pretty, who had developed an interest in archaeology after visiting excavations in Egypt. She got into contact with the local archaeologist Basil Brown and hired him to investigate the burial ground for her. Brown dug 3 mounds, number 3, 2 and 4, with the help of Pretty's gamekeeper and gardener. All of these had been robbed in the past. Still, Brown found a few artefacts, enough to encourage Pretty to sponsor another season of investigation. Mound 2 was interpreted as a boat burial and provided Brown with invaluable experience for what he was going to face in the following year. In 1939, Mrs. Pretty asked Brown to investigate the largest of the barrows, Mound 1, and as the 3 men dug the trench, ship's rivets were encountered again, and one end of a huge ship was gradually uncovered. Brown realised that the wood had rotted away, but the rivets were still in situ, leaving a fragile, thin crust of sand, hardened by the decaying wood in contact with it. Brown had his assistants work to clear the overburden, while he carefully removed the loose sand covering the ship itself, exposing them rivet by rivet, leaving a thin layer of sand over it to protect it from the elements until it could all be removed at once to document it properly. After a few weeks, he realised that this ship was comparable with the famous Oseberg and Gokstad ships, and this could be a huge discovery, if it hadn't been looted already. The team discovered a shaft that had been dug down into the centre of the mound, with fragments of a Bartman jug in it, dating to the 16th or early 17th centuries. Luckily, the shaft had been abandoned before the grave robbers encountered the burial. They now realised they had an undisturbed ship burial on their hands, and this was a big deal. Word soon got out to the wider archaeological community. Charles Phillips, a Cambridge University archaeologist, visited the site, and was invited to direct the project from that point on. The excavation was still conducted on a minimal budget, though. The team collected moss from the estate to use as packing material in the boxes that they collected from grocery stores. I cannot say I've ever used moss, but raiding grocery stores for free cardboard boxes is still accepted archaeological practice. The burials were completely excavated, and in August 1939 a team from the Science Museum under Lieutenant Commander J.K.D. Hutchinson surveyed the ship's structure. 2 schoolteachers who visited the site, Mercy Lack and Barbara Wagstaff, joined the team, and these shutterbugs took over 1,000 black and white and a few colour photos of the ship, capturing details of the ship's structure from many angles. Their photos would prove precious, as the Science Department's unpublished survey results would be destroyed during the war. Mrs. Pretty was awarded the treasure trove, and she donated it to the British Museum. The artefacts were transported to London, and they were stored in a tunnel off the Aldwych tube line for the duration of the war. In 1946, the huge conservation and restoration process could finally begin. Between 1965 and 1970, British Museum archaeologists under Rupert Bruce Mitford returned to Sutton Hoo. They conducted a detailed survey of the mounds, including a geophysical survey with resistivity and magnetometers, and did a metal detector survey of the area. The ship grave was reopened and the ship surveyed again. The spoil heap from the 1939 dig was sieved to make sure that nothing was missed, and relatively little was found, a testament to the skills of the 1939 excavators. They hoped to preserve the impression of the ship, but they were to find that the ship had degraded far more than expected since 1939. Because the ship had never been backfilled, only covered with a few pieces of bracken and sackcloth, much of it had crumbled. During World War II, Sutton Hoo had been used for military training, including the open excavation trench. Slit trenches were dug across the stern of the ship, and the mound was used for mortar practice, until an archaeologically minded officer put a stop to it. So the ship really did look like a bomb hit it. The team decided to make a plaster cast of the ship impression instead of preserving it. In the 1980s and 1990s, another big archaeological project was launched at Sutton Hoo under Martin Carver, geophysically surveying, then excavating a wide area, including mounds 2, 5, 6, 7, 14, 17 and 18. The re-excavation of Mound 2 showed that rather than being a boat as Brown thought, the mound once contained a 20-metre-long ship, the prow and stern of which would have stuck out the sides of the mound, which the team rebuilt as part of the project. All the mounds excavated except Mound 17 had been looted. Mound 17 contained the burial of a wealthy young man and a pony. A number of execution burials were found as well. The bones had dissolved, staining the sand, allowing the figures to be carefully exposed. It's possible that a gallows was located on the nearby Mound 5. The Sutton Hoo ship was a 27-metre long, 4.5-metre wide, clinker-built open vessel with rowlocks for 40 oars. While there were many rivets used in its construction, wooden tree nails were used to secure the frames to the planking below the top strake. It had a long working life and contained evidence of repair. Its hull was patched in several places. The central section had been modified to accommodate the burial chamber, so it's not clear whether the ship had a mast or not. There are plans to build a full-size replica of the ship in Woodbridge across the river from Sutton Hoo. The acidic soil conditions destroyed all the wood in the ship, and all but chemical traces of the body in the burial, phosphates, indicative of a decomposed body, that were discovered in testing by the British Museum in 1967. The burial chamber itself was a wooden structure 5.5 metres long and as wide as the ship, 4.5 metres. The chamber must have been completely sealed from the surrounding sand. That was until the timber rotted to such a degree that the weight of the sand got too much for it and it poured in, crushing the burial chamber. The archaeologists found a dense layer of decayed wood directly covering all the burial goods. The burial itself was a grand, ornate pagan affair. The dead man was accompanied with a range of possessions that reflected all aspects of life. These photos I took at the Interpretation Centre at Sutton Hoo show a reconstruction of what it could have been like. The larger and more domestic objects were hung or laid on the end walls, while the more precious and personal items were arranged along the centre line of the chamber, presumably with the body. At the eastern end there was an iron-bound tub and a wooden bucket, 3 cauldrons along with the quite ornate chain used to suspend one over a fire, and a small iron lamp full of beeswax with a small, very plain, unglazed pottery bottle. At the western end, closer to the head of the body, was another iron-bound bucket, a large iron-bound stand of unknown use, and a stack of spears and angons. An angon is a type of javelin that the Anglo-Saxon and other German and Frankish peoples used, very similar to and likely inspired by the Roman pilum. A maple wood lyre was hung near the spears, probably inside a beaver skin bag. Parts of the maple wood body of the lyre survived, desiccated inside the heavy bronze Coptic bowl that was in the same corner. A bronze Celtic hanging bowl once hung on the nail on the wall above, but before or during the collapse it fell inside the Coptic bowl too. This bronze bowl had ornate enamelled decorations on it, and a tiny fish sculpture inside that was once tinned. It had been repaired at some point with silver patches that the repairer saw fit to decorate. A round shield leant against the wall nearby, with a heavy iron boss and beautiful gilt bronze decoration set with garnets. The shield would have been 91.5 centimetres in diameter, made of lime wood and covered in hide. The shield is very similar to examples found in Vendel and Valsgard in Sweden, particularly Vendel Grave 12, and is likely made by Swedish armourers. The shield was covered in ornate and fragile gilded fittings, suggesting that this was a ceremonial item, not an actual tool of war. Beside the shield was the sceptre, an unusual construction made from an ornate 4-sided whetstone. The whetstone appears never to have been used to sharpen anything, and is decorated at either end with faces, some bearded, some clean-shaven. Crowned with a bronze and iron wire ring, and bronze stag, this is an unusual and frankly unique object. The remains of a set of whale ivory gaming pieces were found in amongst the fragments of the shield, all but one piece, which for some reason was located amongst the items at the man's feet. And so we come to the body itself. A stack of items sat at his feet, with a large silver dish known as the Anastasius dish on top. It had protected the others from damage when the burial chamber collapsed. The 72-centimetre diameter dish was made in Constantinople during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius I, 491 to 518 AD. The material protected under it included a deeply fluted silver bowl, containing a smaller silver bowl, a set of walnut burwood cups with gilt silver mounts, 3 bone combs, 4 iron knives, an otter-skin cap, and an iron-mounted wooden box. There was also a mass of folded textiles, leather garments, 4 leather shoes, silver and bronze buckles, a horn cup, 2 small bronze hanging bowls, a silver ladle, and folded at the bottom was a mail shirt, made from 8mm iron links, alternately butted and riveted links. This surprises me. My experience with buttered mail is it's complete rubbish. I wonder if the buttered links are actually welded or soldered, but only appear buttered in the analysis of the rusty remains. Lying beside this pile, and corroded onto the mail shirt, was a very unusual, very plain and very practical-looking axe hammer, 78 centimetres long, with a solid iron handle as well as head. Arranged over the legs of the man were 6 maple wood drinking bottles and 2 large drinking horns, all with gilt silver mounts. The horns were so large they were likely made from the horns of an aurochs. The stamped gilt silver mountings were very ornate, and the complete set would have been very impressive. At his right side lay a single spear, 2 silver bowls with spoons engraved with the names Saul and Paul in Greek, and an amazing pattern-welded migration-era sword with its sword belt covered in garnet-inlaid golden fittings. Pattern welding is a technique of welding folded steel and iron rods together, giving the finished sword a patterned iron core with steel cutting edges. In the case of this sword, radiography has shown that the blade was made from 8 bundles of iron rods, twisted in such a way to make a herringbone pattern in the finished blade. The blade was very high quality, and the hilt was ornate to match, bedecked in gold with garnet cloisonne inlay. The pommel, scabbard and sword belt fittings, along with other finds from the burial, such as the shoulder clasps and purse lids, were all decorated using the cloisonne technique. This was done by soldering patterns of gold wire to a backing, and then setting garnets, enamel or glass into the hollows. In these cases, the whole surface was then ground and polished smooth and flush. The combinations of garnet and gold in these ornate inlays is truly striking. In amongst the sword belt parts was found the gold filigree and garnet cabochon fittings from a bone or ivory object that, for lack of a better term, has been called a wand. This item is often overlooked, and as a result I don't have a photo to show you of it. It does go to show there are a number of items in this assemblage that we simply have no idea what they are. To the body's left sat the famous Sutton Hoo helmet, an amazing piece of work that's come to symbolise the site. The iron helmet was crushed into over 500 fragments when the burial chamber collapsed, and took almost a year to piece it back together. Even in this stage you can see the ornate decoration it was covered in. The iron of the helmet was once covered in tin bronze foil plates, giving it a silvery appearance, held in place using fluted bronze strips. Different designs were stamped into these foil plates, sinuous beasts interlaced together, and another showed a mounted warrior riding down a fallen warrior who's stabbing the horse. Another shows 2 dancing warriors. The helmet's design is considered to have a blend of influences. Its structure is inspired by late Roman Empire parade helmets, but its decorative elements are all Swedish, making for a very unique-looking helmet. Around his waist was a belt clasped with the magnificent golden belt buckle and holding the ornately decorated purse, containing 37 gold coins dating between AD 610 and 625, 3 coin blanks and 2 gold ingots. The purse lid would have been made of bone or ivory and was covered in gold and garnet cloisonne decorations and has a golden clasp on it. Presumably on the body's shoulders were 2 gorgeous garnet and millefiori glass inlaid gold shoulder clasps, which were both functional and highly decorative. The great gold belt buckle is an amazing piece of metalwork, weighing nearly a pound. It has an ingenious mechanism with 3 sliders on the back that lock into slots in the pins projecting through the holes in the belt behind the 3 large domes. Once cast, the knotwork was decorated further with punched decoration, and certain recesses filled with niello, a black mixture of copper, silver and lead sulfides, to provide some contrast in the sea of gold. The buckle remains a masterpiece of the goldsmith's art, and testament to the skill of the pre-industrial master craftsman. These items were made in the time period commonly known as the Dark Ages. Think about that a bit. So who was this wealthy noble, buried in such finery? The quality of the items would suggest we're dealing with royalty, and the date of the objects put us to the early to mid 7th century AD. There's relatively little known about the Kingdom of East Anglia in this time period. What is known is from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and the Historia Ecclesiastica, written by Bede in the early 8th century. There are a few contenders, but the most popular choice with scholars is King Raedwald, who died around 625. Raedwald was considered the greatest of the various Anglo-Saxon kings at the time. He had a long reign and was very wealthy and powerful. He converted to Christianity while visiting the court of Ethelbert in Kent, but Bede says he reverted to paganism as soon as he returned home. Raedwald's wife was pagan and not a woman to be trifled with. I imagine the queen would have been less than pleased at her husband's conversion. It was probably purely a political move, given the religious conflict in the country at the time, and Raedwald maintained both Christian and pagan temples. There are other possibilities for the occupants of Mound 1. Raedwald's son Jorpwald, who had a very brief reign, was assassinated shortly after converting to Christianity. After him there's Siegbert and Ecgric, who ruled together for a time, and were both killed in battle with the Mercians around 636 AD. Out of these options, Raedwald makes the most sense to me, but I'd be the first to admit that it's just an educated guess, and we'll never be entirely certain who was the man behind this mask. I hope you found this video interesting. The ship, treasures and mysteries of Sutton Hoo have always fascinated me. My source for this video is this book by Angela Evans, produced by the British Museum. There's a great visitors centre at Sutton Hoo, run by the National Trust, construction of which resulted in the discovery of more Anglo-Saxon burials. There are interesting displays at Ipswich Museum, and of course the treasures themselves are located in the British Museum in London. I encourage any of my viewers in the UK to go check them out. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. Cheers!